In this video, I want to share with you my favorite fonts to use in 2025 with real world examples of how to use them with my own work and a bunch of cool stuff that I found online. Let's get into it. I put together this mini presentation in Illustrator so we can go through some of the fonts. The first one on the list is ITC Machine. This slowly became one of my favorite typefaces this year by far. The sharp edges, the tall condensed letter forms, it's perfect for posters and stuff where you really want to fill a space and give a bold and aggressive statement to something. It comes in just regular and bold, and it only comes in all caps, which is fine because I feel like I would use this kind of typeface in all caps for the most part anyway. But I've used it in a bunch of personal work this year. You probably most famously know it on the Blockbuster logo. The identity was done by Lee Dean. I'm trying my best to credit people at the bottom with the work I find. I realized in one of these last font videos I didn't do that. And it wasn't because I didn't want to credit people. It's just I gathered all the assets and then I couldn't even remember where I found them. So shout out to Fonts in Use for helping me find some of this stuff. So super cool how the identity was expanded for Blockbuster. Secondly, you may recognize it. They use a modified version of it in the Predator poster. The younger designer in me thought it was a little bit corny, maybe a little too aggressive. When you're younger, you're like, DeFont, basic fonts, let's try these. And then when you get middle tier designer, you become very pretentious. You only want to use sans serifs, Helvetica, this and that. And then you get to the end and it's like, yo, DeFont is sick. Here's some other references that I found. This vintage book cover. They used it here in the Space Invaders logo. Obviously they skewed it a bunch, but I think this works in a very modern and retro sense. So I love it here on this BB King album art with this awesome illustration by Ed Scarisbrick. Here's some work that I've used it in, this personal poster. One of my most popular Instagram design posts, a poster designed by Waylon Jennings. I really love having a lot of copy on posters like this, and I think ITC Machine works really well for that. Here's another example here where I used it in my sticky notes affirmation series. This was actually hand traced with a pencil, but I obviously used ITC Machine as the reference for the letter forms. And then lastly, on this Weapon X concept art, that was part of my hardcore series. You can see it even looks good and holds up in a bold way when it's just the stroke and doesn't even have any fill attached to it. This next one is called FF Blur or just Blur. That's usually what I call it, but I think this is the proper one if you want to research it and try to download it. It's basically a blurred and wavy version of just Neue Haas Grotesque, probably the most famous sans serif. It was made by using photo transparency sheets or something and blurring it like an old analog way. And it was designed by Neville Brody, who is one of the best designers of all time when it comes to typography, layout, and just kind of that avant-garde kind of postmodernism stuff from the 90s and the 2000s. Here's some graphics that he did for the promotion of selling the actual font. Here it is used on this Beck album cover, which I thought was really cool, and it really fit the theme of this wavy, psychedelic imagery they have going on here. Very 2000s font, like I said, so you have it here on TLC album art. And I just think it looks really good in body copy, and it gives, so you can see they were using this all over America, Germany. Here's a jazz fest from Berlin, very 90s 2000s aesthetic. I think this font works really well paired with a serif, so I used it here in this Sunshine poster mixed with Roslindale. Another way you can mess around with it is stretch it out. I really like stretching out sans serifs, especially basic ones like Arial. So I did that here with Blur. So definitely check this font out if you want something clean and basic, but also a little bit more experimental and has some character to it instead of just a normal sans serif. Probably my favorite serif this year. This one's by Blaze Type. It's called APOC. Comes in a bunch of different versions from normal to dark, and they also have this Revelations version, which you can't tell too much with the examples here, but if you look at the R right here, how it comes to more of a point, or on the G right here, it's a little bit more sharp. I personally like the Revelations version and using it in all caps way. Here are some awesome examples that I found through Fonts in Use. Really nice, sharp. It pairs really well with different serifs, smaller serifs in the body copy, or different sans serifs. I think it looks good on book covers, posters, anything where you really want. I don't know, it's like this font is nice because it's a mix of something that feels a lot more traditional and familiar, but more modern because it has that sharpness and it gives it that little bit more avant-garde feeling by having such like angular shapes to it. Here it is using this awesome landing page by Emil. It just looks really nice, you know, stacking the text in the body copy, the header. Good use of hierarchy here. Same goes with this poster design as part of a brand identity for Circulo by Kokoda Studio. I really like how this looks. It shows the numbers, how good the numbers are. The numbers are one of my favorite parts of this typeface. Here it is also all caps. I think this is the Revelations version. I really like this layout for this website. Like I said, I really like the numbers. So when I worked on this Alesso flyer, I used the numbers really bold down here in an italicized version. And I just paired it with the simple Neue Haas Grotesque. This 7 is probably my favorite, one of my favorite 7s I've ever seen. Same with this 3. It just looks so good. I used it also here in this New Lords album cover. Had a lot of fun working on this one. It was a concept art as a part of my hardcore series. I used it here in some small body copy. You can see it still holds up at a very small scale. And even if you want to manipulate it, I stretched the fuck out of the font right here and it really went from margin to margin, and I feel like it still holds up. It's still very readable. It looks really nice, and paired it with IBM Plex Mono, I believe, at the bottom. All right, this next one is Cortez. I love this one. It really reminds me of some of those old horror books or old like rock and roll type stuff that you'd see in the 70s and 80s, like anything from a Stephen King to like Metallica, you know, anything in that kind of world. That's what this really reminds me of. I think it's an awesome serif if you want something with a little more edge and character. You can see here it goes from thin to ultra, and I personally really like using it in all caps. I actually found this font through the creator, Mark Van Leeuwen, and he was kind enough to send me a trial version a while back. He made such dope promotional materials for this. These are literally just promotional materials for the typeface that I had to get it. Like, he made this shit look so good. These look like such nice, like, official projects that I couldn't help but download it. Like, he's literally just doing this to showcase the font. What better way could you showcase a typeface than making really dope aspirational stuff like this that people would want to do? Here it is used in a different sense, this more fantasy, like medieval looking stuff. I didn't look too deep into the project, but I just really like this use case. It shows it in a bunch of different contexts and how it really holds up. I actually proposed the use of this typeface in a branding project I was working on for the band Architects. I used a modified version of it here using all lowercase and deleting the dots, whatever you want to call them. They're like triangles in this one from the eye. They ended up not using this project. This was just one of the concepts that I proposed. They went with a different option, but I really liked how this felt for this type of band, and it was cool to show it in just some different use cases. These are just simple mock-ups, you know. The project was mainly about the logo type, but just wanted to give them some examples here. Here it is used in all caps as another one, a part of my sticky note affirmations. I really like how it looks in print because you get some of this jagged edges. Used it here in paired with a nice sans serif. I really like the numbers in this font as well. I even used it in some Instagram reels for the covers, for the captions and stuff like this on some brand deals that I worked with Adobe. Here is an example of one of the little graphics I'm putting in my zine coming out soon. I have a design studio now called Cuesta Studio that I work on my client projects with, and I'm also planning on releasing occasional products and whatnot. The first one coming soon is going to be the zine, and here was a graphic I was working on for it, and I really liked how this font held up with these crazy effects and whatnot. All right, this next one is Carbon, something that I found recently on Twitter. I actually use it here in the small body copy up here, the fave fonts, Jesse Nyberg. I like it personally in the all caps and the thin version, and I really like to track it in. These is kind of spaced out just to show you the letter forms, but a really good typeface. Very simple, very industrial, works really good at small scale. I couldn't find a ton of examples of it in use, but here it is in arguably one of the best video games of all time, Modern Warfare. So shout out to Infinity Ward for knowing what they're doing with their typefaces. They use it here in this kind of, you know, this font very well suits that aesthetic of the fake world, sci-fi, military, digital interfaces and stuff. It's very that feeling. I used it here in the just as a little overlay. I like it as like small little things to pop in here and there. If you need a font to pair with something more large and decorative, like on a poster or an album art, I think this one works well to be a little bit more understated and just live nice in the background. Kind of like this, you know, we have this more decorative one right here, and then we use it just to give it some nice little subtle details. Obviously, been on this list before, will continue to be on most lists you probably run into. One of the best fonts of all time, Neue Grotesque, basically Helvetica, but the better kerned kind of print version from the past that I enjoy more. Goes from light to black, all italicized. There's probably even more weights and stuff when you get the variable ones. They used it here in some more corporate stuff for the Pinterest branding. Beautiful layout, something that this is, you know, graphic design 101 type shit. Like good layout, clean font, you can manipulate it, you can leave it nice, like what the OGs of design really liked, you know, understated, minimalism, good communication, looks good, works good, all that jazz. You know, you got some good hierarchy here with the bold versions. You can even use it in a real fun way and more modern way, you know, like this Nike Air stuff. Have it all the way to something like Bloomberg Business Week, you know. This is the most versatile font of all time, I think. I've used it here. You can stretch it out. I really like how it looks stretched out that I did for the social media graphics for grapes. You can pair it with a black letter font if you really want to get weird with it, like in this Last Wishes album art concept. You can even add a giant stroke to it and give it that really big, crowded ink bleed type of feel. You can use a laser printer to print it at this big on a sticky note and it still looks good. I really like how it looks here stretched out, like I said, and paired with some black letter. I loved how this Trapped Under Ice album art concept came out, and I just love this font. So if you're gonna take any from this video, you probably already have this one, but if you don't, grab it. DeBerry, or Duke DeBerry, I think. This was become one of my favorite more decorative fonts this past year. I think it's taken from this old Michel de Montaigne book. I like pairing it with those more simple fonts like Neue Grotesque to help it stand out and give your overall like lockups some more visual interest. You can use it with a nice glow on it like this. I love using it for my Instagram videos and stuff to help it stand out from some of the more basic fonts you see flying around on short form video. I worked on this proposal project for Metallica where we were just submitting a bunch of designs for one of their upcoming tours, and I actually used it down here. I really like how the numbers look, and when you pair like each word with the first letter being capitalized, I think that's where this font really shines. Like the A is one of my favorites. Here it is in an MLB postseason project, this brand deal that I was working on with Adobe. You know, pairing it with a sans serif, like I said, it makes it feel very modern, but kind of classic and more vintage at the same time. One of my favorite use cases of this font was when I worked on this concept art for World of Pleasure. I really liked how this turned out because it felt like those white label style old like techno and house records. It was something like that. I wanted to bring this type of kind of classic black letter font into that context, which it usually isn't in. Roslindale, you've probably seen it before. It comes in so many versions. I didn't even include a slide for it because it has thin, condensed, compressed, wide, narrow, deck versions, body copy versions. There's a bunch. There's so many, but that's what makes it so versatile. I really like the condensed versions. It looks good in all caps like this. A very like designers kind of font, you know. They even used it in this festival conference thing for designers that want to like showcase kind of our pretentiousness or whatever with these weird little copywriting stuff. Here it is in the house branding. I really like this brand and how they do all their art direction, and it looks really nice. And they had the U connect to this S with this cool ligature. Here it is a little bit more expanded. Looks really good in print. One of my favorite uses of this font I found was this awesome album art by Heinrich Mierwald. Here it is on the front. Awesome lockup with all this copy. It looks good when it's more simple like this and when it's filled with a bunch of other stuff. Song title insert, or maybe this is the sleeve for the record. That red on that black is just a perfect combination. I used it here in that Weapon X demo that I showed earlier. This was the insert, and you have the actual font up here and the ITC machine down there. One of my favorite uses of this that I've done is in another concept art, part of my hardcore series. This one was for Have Heart. Looks really good in all caps when you track it in, and you can fit it as like nice little titles, pair it with a sans serif, and you're good to go. All right, this next one is Sequel 100, a very wide and bold sans serif. It comes in all these different weights, very versatile. They used it here on some garments with this Nike Windrunner. For a while, I got kind of sick of these really extended, extra bold, black, ultra, whatever weight you want to call it, sans serifs, because it was very popular in like the 2016 to 2021, maybe around there. And I got really into condensed sans serifs at that time because I was using these too much, and so was everyone else. But now I feel like that's died down a little bit, and I've really grown to love them again. Here's an awesome use case for it in this Face It album art. Simplecast website. I really liked how this landing page looked. I used it here in this Zulu concept art. Looks really good when you scale it up in all lowercase. And I also used it when I was working on the Dyson Steel movie poster project. These were some alternatives. We ended up going with a different one that was Dharma Gothic, but I really liked these versions as well. Looks really good when you have it big, small, whatever size. It's just a good, bold, wide sans serif. All right, the last font on this list, it was on one of my past ones, but I wanted to include it as well. Neue Kabel. It's just the updated, digitized version, basically cleaned up of Kabel, the other font. Goes from thin to black. My favorite versions are probably regular or black. I like it simple and normal, or all the way darkened like that. I just think this font is so classic, always looks good. I love the stacking when you have the lowercase letter forms on top of each other. Sometimes you just find such cool uses of design in like old, especially old blue collar companies like electrical companies, construction, the service industry. They had such good print design anytime before the late 80s and 90s. Here's a nice example of the book cover, and like I was saying, the good stacking that you can create with it. One of my favorite examples was this sob story marketing for the album by John Mayer, and the design was done by Jeremy Dean. Awesome designer that I really like. He told me about it when I interviewed him on my podcast, that he got to work with Columbia Records on this, and they gave him access to the whole archives of the fonts they were using at the time. And so this was like a very good replica of the marketing they did at that time, because he had all the context right. He had the right fonts, colors, all that. And this project was just really cool. Looks super clean on this awesome Gruber album art. I've used it a bunch. I used it in all caps on this energy playlist. It's one of my go-tos for sure when I want something bold and geometric. My own take on some vintage inspired ads. This pasture raised chicken one. Using the black version again here. I used it as a subheader on this David Bowie project that I worked on, pairing it with, I believe this decorative font is called Davida. And then I even used it in all caps here, still in the black version, for a project that I worked on with Western Digital. And then lastly, I used it here paired with, I think Manicoti is this one, and playlist cover art for my Cuesta playlist. I just, like I said, really like how it stacks. It looks good in all caps or in lowercase. Just one of my favorite fonts of all time, and something you should definitely add to your library in 2025. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.